Church, y'all may be seated. Before we get started, why don't you look at the person next to you and say, hey, I know it's the middle of August, but you've got a new year glow about you. Y'all look amazing on this thankfully cloudy August day. Feels like it's been 100 degrees and sunny for about 3 weeks straight, so I'll take this. Church, I'll never forget the look on her face. It was the middle of a hot July day, and there she stood, all alone, except for the young man who was accompanying her, who stood towering over her on the sidewalk, yelling insults and berating her at the very top of his lungs. All this while a long line of traffic and bystanders simply watched. And as my car drew closer, I didn't know exactly what to do, but I knew that I had to do something. So as I approached, I rolled down my window and I made eye contact with both of them as a way to signal to him that somebody sees you and somebody sees her and somebody actually cares. And I began to honk my horn as loud as I possibly could. And he turned and looked at me, then began to walk in the opposite direction. And this young woman was left there, visibly shaken. And I simply said to her, "Is there some place safe you need me to take you to?" And for a myriad of reasons, one of which presumably being my unfamiliar male body, not exactly representing safety in the moment, she simply says, "I'm okay. I'm okay." And in the very next moment, the man she had been with comes back, only this time in a car with about 5 other people inside. And he jumps out of the car, telling her to get in. And church, I wish in this moment I could tell you that that's when I jumped out of my car. And that's when I went from associate rector to Steven Seagal, disabling everyone inside the vehicle with a series of non-lethal pressure point attacks. But I didn't. I stayed in my car as he convinced her to get into his. And they all drove off. And y'all, for me, the most ironic thing about this story is that the young lady in question was a black woman. And just a few days earlier, I had purchased a t-shirt with the phrase in big, bold letters on the front that read, "Protect Black Women." A phrase I believed in with all my soul, and a phrase I still believe in with all my soul to this very day. But you see, church, in that moment, and in this moment in today's gospel story, I'm presented, and we are all presented with this question. And the question is this: what will we do when life, as life so often does, dares us to be everything that we say we believe? What will we do when life dares us to be what we say we believe? Y'all, Jesus is preaching and teaching in the synagogue on the Sabbath. Jesus is in a holy and revered place on a holy and revered day. Now, for us as Christians, this isn't a moment to feel superior to our Jewish siblings, because I believe in this text that a very Jewish Jesus is pulling from his very Jewish roots and identity. Look at your neighbor and say, hey now, don't forget Jesus was Jewish. Perhaps Jesus was teaching on the Jewish principle of tikkun olam, which is the sense of responsibility rooted in Judaism, that we as human beings have a duty to leave the world better off than when we found it, and to participate in the healing and repair of the world. Perhaps Jesus is teaching on the creation story found in the Torah, in which we're told that every human being, regardless of socioeconomic status, ethnic identity, gender or sexuality, ability or religion, comes into the world stamped with the very image of God. Or perhaps Jesus is drawing from the story of Cain and Abel, in which it is revealed that we are one another's keeper. Imagine Jesus getting on a roll as he's teaching and preaching and drawing some amens and maybe even a couple of shouts. And instead of just sending by everybody home to Chipotle happy, instead of that, Jesus just stops. No Chipotle. No more sermon. Jesus just stops. He stops preaching a sermon, and instead he decides to be one. And he heals a woman who has been beset by a spirit for 18 years. Oh, come on, All Saints Church. That's something to turn up over, right? That's something to get excited about, right? Our God is a healer, amen. Jesus is a healer, amen. We say that on Sundays, right? And here he is, healing in this story. But instead of joy and shouting and dancing and singing and the Dougie and the Gritty and all the other dances that in my sanctified imagination I would see them doing, the leader of the synagogue interrupts the moment. And he starts questioning loud enough for the whole room to hear whether or not this was the right way to do things. He interrupts the moment because he thinks that she's interrupting worship. But then Jesus interrupts him right back, perhaps to let him and the whole room wonder whether or not this woman's presence was actually interrupting worship at all. Maybe Jesus is causing them to wonder if this person's presence, if her presence isn't interrupting worship, but maybe her very presence is actually initiating worship. Because, church, sometimes what we label as the interruption is actually the worship, and what we label as the worship is actually just the interruption. Look at your neighbor and say, sometimes we get it twisted. And this synagogue leader, let's just call him Mike, since Mike's on sabbatical and can't object. Enjoy that, my brother. Y'all, Mike's not just grouchy. Mike's not just being a hater. Mike didn't just wake up on the wrong side of the bed. Mike just didn't get his wordle for the day wrong. But Mike is reminding the people of something worthy. He's reminding the people of their identity and of the rules and the systems and the symbols and the traditions that go along with that. I mean, after all, again, this is the Sabbath, and the very good commandment to rest on the Sabbath that the Jewish people received upon being delivered from forced labor camps in Egypt, that reminded them that they were human beings and not just producers of capital for an empire, was at the center of the conversation. You see, ultimately, the Sabbath was about the people. The Sabbath was about human dignity. The Sabbath was about life, which is exactly why in this moment, Jesus decides to break it. Or maybe he fulfills it as he elevates the sanctity of her situation over the system that they had created around the Sabbath. And Jesus reminds them, and Jesus reminds us, that people aren't made to serve systems, but systems are made to serve people. And that when presented with a conflict, instead of tearing down the people in service to the system, we ought to tear down systems in service to the people. Sabbath was about life. And right in that synagogue was a woman who desperately needed a people who dared to actually be everything that they said they believed. All Saints Church, I love our 4 core values. I just got done having a conversation about one of them, ethical stewardship. As a matter of fact, let's do a little experiment. Let me check on something. Who can name out loud our 4 core values? This is a pop quiz, and I done already helped you. I told you how many of them there are, and I actually told you one, okay? So let's just shout them out. What are our core values here at All Saints Church? Just shout them out. Joyful spirituality. What's up? What's another one? Radical inclusivity. And one more. What's the last one? Courageous justice. Okay, I think we did it. Clap it up, y'all. Those are all the things we say we believe. But let's just take one. Radical inclusivity. What would happen in the life of our church and in the future of our church if we dared to actually be what we said we believed when it came to radical inclusivity? Okay, we're just gonna have a family conversation. Put on your seatbelt, get ready, all right? Let's just take that word radical. Let's just break it down. Let's just take the word radical, which, as Angela Davis reminds us, simply means to grasp at things at the root. And inclusivity simply means providing equal access to opportunities and resources, especially to those who have been historically marginalized. So at the root of inclusivity is equal access to opportunities and resources and all the things that inclusivity offers. So here at All Saints Church, what opportunities do we offer? Let's just take Sunday morning. We offer the opportunity to worship in song and through the beautiful iconography and decor of our wonderful sanctuary. Just look around. Isn't it beautiful? Isn't it beautiful? We can give it up for our sanctuary. I'm not playing a trick on you. But if we dare to grasp inclusivity at the root and actually became what we believed and provided equal opportunities to worship in song, we might become a place where we'd sing as much Fred Hammond accompanied by a Hammond B3 as we sing Beethoven. Amen, lights. Amen, lights. If we actually became what we said we believed, we might become a place where when you looked up around the windows, that whoever you are and wherever you found yourself on the journey of faith, these stained glass windows told you that there was a place for you here. Just saying, just saying. Oh, if we became what we actually believed, instead of simply singing songs we already knew and liked in Spanish, we'd actually sing songs in Spanish that were germane to the religious and cultural experience of our Latinx siblings of various nationalities. Let me back up a little bit. You might say, Chase, you got to be careful, because these are some of the things that touch at the very core of what it means to be an Episcopalian. But All Saints Church, what if we were so radically inclusive that we expanded what that even meant in the first place? And this ain't just about having more different types of people come through the door and come to our church, because why would we invite more people to come if we're not surrendering and changing the reasons that they don't? There's a saying that I grew up hearing, it's tight, but it's right. That is what my good friend, the Reverend Dr. Bryson White, called a few weeks ago predatory inclusion. That's not a radical inclusion. It's an inclusion for the purpose of consumption, exploitation, and tokenism that often leaves black people and other people of color damaged and harmed in its wake. And All Saints Church, I know we're not about predatory inclusion, but I know up in this place we're about radical inclusion. Amen? Unless you think Chase is on his high horse, I'm not on a high horse. It's more like a pony today. Because remember, I'm the guy at the beginning of the story that didn't get out of the car. So I know this isn't easy. I know this isn't always overnight. And as always, if you have any problems with what I'm saying, if you have any problem with anything I'm saying, I'm not running from any conversation. Email me and we can set up a time to vigorously discuss these matters. My email address is showard@allsaints-paths.org. Just being serious. But All Saints Church, I'm so glad that our faith and our worship and our community life as a church isn't rooted in me, but is rooted in the one who actually did get out of the car and put himself directly in harm's way. And he didn't go Steven Seagal, but he surrendered and let the systems of this world go Steven Seagal on him, allowing the blows of empire, hate, and state-sanctioned violence to rain down its blows on his flesh. And not simply to be a substitute, but to be a prophetic example to the whole world for all of time that shows us, as Dr. King once said, that hate cannot drive out hate, but only love can do that. And that darkness cannot drive out darkness, but only light can do that. And if you're wondering for a moment just who it is I'm talking about, his name is Jesus. The same Jesus who saw a woman whose back had been bent for 18 years is the same Jesus who sees the places where our backs are bent in this very moment. And that same Jesus offers us healing, liberation, and wholeness. Oh, this same brown Jesus who lived the black experience offers healing and liberation to those people of African descent here in America whose backs have been bent for centuries by anti-blackness and white supremacy. This same Jesus who was pushed out of Jerusalem offers healing and liberation to our indigenous siblings pushed onto reservations on the land they themselves cultivated, backs bent by genocide and demonization. This same Jesus who was fixed to a cross offers healing and liberation to the countless women, and specifically women of color, who find themselves fixed inside the crosshairs of patriarchy and racism. This same Jesus who was treated like a foreigner in the very land of his origin offers healing and liberation to our Asian siblings here in America who are constantly treated as the perpetual foreigner, no matter their history and legacy. To our LGBTQ siblings whose backs have been bent by the theology of the church, due to whom you cannot help but love, Jesus offers healing and liberation as one who was also persecuted, over whom he could not help but love, that being all of us. That same Jesus says to us today, may every system that stands in the way of you and the abundant life I have created you to live be torn down in the service of your salvation and wholeness. Because in Jesus, we have the one who became one of us, who became the very object of his love and affection. And he sees us as people groups, and he sees us as people. Beloved, Jesus is not too preoccupied to see you, my friend. I don't know what you brought into church this morning. I don't know what you've been carrying and holding, but let's just close our eyes. Just close your eyes. And I'm closing. This is the end, I promise. I wouldn't have you close your eyes and keep preaching another 27 minutes. I'd just go another 17. But just close your eyes. Whatever you brought into this sanctuary this morning, whatever point of pain or suffering you've been navigating, imagine Jesus doing for you in this moment what he did in this story. Imagine Jesus stopping everything and tending to your need, right in that spot where it's been hurting the most. I don't know what it is for you. Maybe it's the weight of anti-blackness. Maybe it's misogynoir and misogyny. Maybe it's your mental health. Maybe your kids are just off the chain right now. Maybe it's in your physical body. I don't know what it is, but just imagine Jesus seeing you, feeling you, and stopping everything just to minister to that place. And as you have a picture of Jesus walking over, just take a deep breath in. Hold it. Take a deep breath out. And for the next 30 seconds, I'm going to stop talking and give us one job, and that job is to just breathe. And imagine Jesus ministering to you right now in that place. Jesus will stop everything because he sees you, because he sees us, and you and we are worth stopping for. May our breath serve as our prayer this morning. In the name of the great healer Jesus, amen.